In the dark corners of 16th century Hungary, a noblewoman's dark obsession festers. Hidden behind the grandeur of her castle walls, the echoes of terror grow louder as she descends into unspeakable cruelty. Her name is Elizabeth Báthory, and this is her villainy. Hello and welcome to Fireside Villainies, where we delve into the dark shadows of history and bring to life the chilling stories of its most infamous figures. I'm Michael, and today we step into the twisted world of one of history's most notorious villains, the Blood Countess, Elizabeth Báthory. Behind the walls of Čachtice Castle, Báthory's life of nobility and influence descended into a nightmarish legacy of torture, bloodshed, and fear. From the opulence of her estates to the horrifying torment she inflicted, this episode reveals how Elizabeth Báthory's once admired status turned into an enduring legend of sadism and terror. Before her downfall, she left behind a trail of devastation that's haunted history ever since. If you enjoy this episode, don't forget to subscribe and follow my channel for more stories from the shadowy recesses of history. And stick around to the end when I share some reflections on the episode. Now, let's gather around the fire and set the stage for the world that shaped Elizabeth Báthory and the turbulent times that fed into her sinister legend. In the heart of 16th century Hungary, a land steeped in the lore of ancient battles and noble bloodlines, a darkness was stirring. It was an era of political intrigue, religious fervor, and the ever-present threat of Ottoman invasion. Amidst this tumultuous backdrop, a young woman named Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into the illustrious Báthory family, one of the most powerful and influential clans in the Kingdom of Hungary. The Báthorys, renowned for their military prowess and vast estates, were intertwined with the very fabric of Hungarian society. Elizabeth's uncle, Stephen Báthory, would even ascend to the throne of Poland and later Transylvania, solidifying the family's prominence. Elizabeth herself was raised in a world of privilege and luxury, surrounded by the trappings of nobility. However, beneath the veneer of wealth and refinement, a sinister undercurrent was taking shape. At the tender age of 15, Elizabeth was betrothed to Ferenc Nadasdy, a formidable warlord known for his ruthlessness in battles against the Ottomans. Their union was a strategic alliance, cementing the bond between two powerful families. Nadasdy, hardened by years of warfare, was a man of stern discipline and unwavering ambition. Some whispered that his methods bordered on cruelty, a trait that would cast a long shadow over Elizabeth's life. The young couple resided in Čachtice Castle, a sprawling fortress perched atop a hill overlooking the vast Hungarian countryside, near what is now Bratislava, Slovakia. It was within these imposing walls that Elizabeth's story would unfold, a tale of unimaginable horror and depravity that would forever stain her name. As the years passed, whispers began to circulate about strange occurrences within the castle. Servants disappeared without a trace, and the screams of young girls echoed through the night. The seeds of Elizabeth's dark descent had been sown, and the stage was set for a reign of terror that would shock the world. The Blood Countess was awakening, and her thirst for cruelty would soon become insatiable. Chapter 1. A Countess Emerges. The year is 1575. The sun hangs low in the late afternoon sky, casting long shadows across the rugged Hungarian landscape. An ornate and golden horse-drawn carriage winds its way through the terrain, the rhythmic clip-clop of the horse's hooves echoing through the valleys. The leather harness creaks softly with each movement, and the polished metal of the carriage gleams in the fading light. Birdsong fills the air, punctuated by the occasional whinny of the horses and the distant bleating of sheep. Inside the carriage, a young Elizabeth Báthory, barely 15, sits rigid with anticipation. Her pale face, framed by raven hair, betrays a flicker of trepidation. Today, she is to meet her betrothed, Ferenc Nadezhdy, a man whose reputation precedes him. But Elizabeth was no stranger to fear or suffering. From a young age, she had witnessed the brutal punishments meted out to the peasants on her family's estates. Executions, public floggings, and cruel torture were not uncommon. They left a lasting imprint on her developing psyche. The normalization of violence within the aristocratic world began to shape her understanding of power and control. Nadezhdy, already a seasoned warrior at 20 years old, stands tall and imposing in the courtyard of Čachtice Castle. His piercing gaze sweeps over Elizabeth as she descends from the carriage. "Welcome, my lady," he greets her, his voice gruff yet laced with a hint of courtesy. Elizabeth curtsies, her heart pounding in her chest. He extends a hand to her, and as their fingers touch, a spark seems to ignite between them. Elizabeth feels a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, but of an unknown, thrilling anticipation. Ferenc's grip is firm yet gentle, and as he leads her into the castle, their eyes meet, locking in a shared moment of silent understanding. In that fleeting instant, they both know that their destinies are irrevocably intertwined, and a wave of both excitement and trepidation washes over them. Čachtice Castle, perched atop a rocky hill overlooking the Va River Valley, presents a formidable sight. Its thick stone walls, scarred by centuries of weathering and conflict, conceal a labyrinth of narrow, winding passages and hidden chambers, whispering tales of secrets yet to be unveiled. Multiple courtyards, some bathed in sunlight, others cloaked in perpetual shadow, offer a stark contrast within the castle's imposing structure. The central keep, while providing a commanding view of the surrounding countryside, also houses a chilling isolation, its cold, austere beauty hinting at a darkness lurking beneath the surface. The castle's interior, though decorated for the joyous occasion, retains an eerie stillness in certain corners. The wedding is a grand affair, a testament to the power and influence of the Báthory and Nadezhdy families. The castle is adorned with vibrant tapestries, fragrant floral garlands, and festive banners, creating an atmosphere of celebration amidst the imposing stone walls. Elizabeth, adorned in a gown of shimmering silk, is a vision of ethereal beauty. The fabric cascades down her slender figure, catching the light with every movement. Delicate pearls embellish the bodice, and long, flowing sleeves add a touch of regal elegance. Her hair, styled in elaborate braids and adorned with jewels, frames her delicate features. A radiant smile lights up her face. In this moment, Elizabeth is the embodiment of youthful radiance. Among the distinguished guests are Elizabeth's formidable aunt, Klara Báthory, and her influential uncle, Stephen Báthory, the future King of Poland. Their presence adds to the grandeur of the occasion, emphasizing the political significance of this union. But beneath the facade of celebration, a sense of unease lingers. Nadezhdy's booming voice fills the air as he recounts his battlefield exploits. Each tale, delivered with a chilling relish, paints vivid images of carnage and conquest. Elizabeth, captivated yet unnerved, hangs onto his every word, the gruesome details sending shivers down her spine. She finds herself both fascinated and repelled by the darkness she glimpses in her husband's eyes, a darkness that mirrors the shadows lurking in the corners of Čachtice Castle. Elizabeth's own childhood was marked by more than just exposure to violence. She suffered from epilepsy, a condition that was not well understood in her time. Her family, concerned about their daughter's condition, subjected her to treatments that were more akin to torture than medicine. Bloodletting, the placement of cold stones on her forehead, and herbal concoctions were prescribed to rid her of the affliction. These early experiences of physical pain, coupled with the violent atmosphere she was raised in, began to stir a fascination with cruelty in young Elizabeth, though it remained dormant for now. In the castle's chapel, adorned with white lilies and golden candles, Ferenc and Elizabeth exchanged their vows. The priest's blessings echoed through the sacred space, sealing their union in the eyes of God and man. And as the wedding feast drew to a close and the last strains of music faded into the night, Ferenc and Elizabeth retreated to their chambers. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an intimate atmosphere. Elizabeth, still captivated by the intensity of her new husband, felt a mix of nervousness and excitement for the life that awaited them within the walls of Čachtice Castle. The echoes of the celebration mingled with the whispers of the ancient stones, hinting at a future shrouded in both darkness and passion. Their journey together had just begun. Life at Čachtice Castle was a brutal contrast to Elizabeth Báthory's sheltered upbringing. The castle, perched on a windswept hill, was a fortress of stone and shadow, where the howling winds seemed to carry the whispers of the damned. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, and the air hung heavy with the scent of fear. The servants, mostly peasant girls, scurried through the cold, draughty halls with downcast eyes, their movements hurried and cautious, as if every breath was a potential misstep. They knew the consequences of failure too well, consequences delivered by the cruel hand of Ferenc Nadezhdy, whose reputation as a brutal warrior extended into the walls of his own home. Elizabeth, accustomed to the deference and obedience of others, found herself increasingly drawn to the power dynamics that ruled life at Čachtice. Nadezhdy, her husband, was a man who relished in cruelty. His temper was swift, his punishments merciless. He viewed the servants as little more than tools to be used and discarded, and his sadistic tendencies were not hidden from his young bride. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight vanished behind the mountains, a servant girl made the mistake of spilling a goblet of wine during supper. The hall fell silent, the air crackling with the tension of what was to come. Nadezhdy, his face a mask of cold fury, rose from his seat. The girl trembled, her eyes wide with terror, but before she could stammer an apology, his hand struck her with a force that sent her sprawling across the stone floor. The sound of the blow echoed through the castle like a gunshot, the girl's cries cutting through the stillness. Elizabeth watched, her breath catching in her throat. A strange, electric thrill coursed through her, a sensation she had never felt before. The sight of the girl's suffering ignited something dark within her, a perverse curiosity that mingled with an unexpected arousal. It was not just a cognitive fascination, it was a visceral, physical response to the pain she had witnessed. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with a twisted excitement. The power to inflict such agony, to hold another's life in her hands, began to intoxicate her. Elizabeth Báthory's descent into cruelty was not a sudden plunge, but a gradual slide, fueled by the shadows that surrounded her and the darkness stirring within. Her privileged upbringing had exposed her to the harsh realities of power, but it was her marriage to Ferenc Nadezhdy that truly unlocked the sinister potential within her. Whispers circulated about Elizabeth's lineage, hinting at inbreeding and a possible predisposition toward mental instability. These rumors, combined with the trauma she may have endured in her youth, created a fertile ground for her sadistic tendencies to flourish. Nadezhdy, known as the Black Knight for his ruthlessness in battle, reveled in inflicting pain on his enemies. Elizabeth observed her husband's violent tendencies with a morbid fascination, drawn to the raw power he wielded over others. But there was something more than mere curiosity at play. Nadezhdy's actions seemed to awaken a dormant darkness within her, a hunger for control and domination that had been lying dormant. One evening, as Nadezhdy punished a servant girl for a minor infraction, Elizabeth's fascination turned into something more sinister. The girl's blood, drawn by a sharp slap, trickled down her face and landed on Elizabeth's outstretched hand. In a moment of morbid curiosity, Elizabeth brought her hand to her lips, tasting the warm metallic liquid. A shiver ran through her, not of disgust, but of a perverse thrill. It was a sensation unlike anything she had ever experienced, a potent cocktail of power and forbidden pleasure. From that moment on, her attraction to inflicting pain became an insatiable hunger. The sight and taste of blood, the cries of her victims, fueled a twisted sense of ecstasy. It wasn't just about punishing those who displeased her. It was about indulging in a dark, primal urge that she could no longer ignore. The once gentle and refined young woman was slowly transforming, her heart hardening with each act of cruelty. Čachtice Castle, once an imposing symbol of noble power, was becoming a breeding ground for suffering. The cries of the tormented echoed through its halls, mingling with the wind that battered its walls. The servants no longer moved with mere caution, they lived in constant dread, knowing that even the smallest mistake could lead to unimaginable pain. Elizabeth Báthory was no longer merely a noblewoman, she was becoming something sinister. The seeds of sadism had taken root in her soul, fed by the suffering of those around her. The Blood Countess was awakening, her desire for control and power over life and death growing with each passing day. And as the darkness within her deepened, so too did her reign of terror, a reign that would soon consume not just Čachtice Castle, but all who were unfortunate enough to cross her path. Chapter 2: The Seeds of Sadism. In 1585, a decade after Elizabeth's opulent and promising wedding to Ferenc Nadezhdy, Čachtice Castle had become a fortress of dread. The villagers whisper of the young countess, once a beacon of beauty and grace, now shrouded in an aura of fear. The air within the castle walls feels thick, oppressive, a stark contrast to the lush countryside that surrounds it. Elizabeth, now in her mid-20s, has grown into her role as the lady of the castle, but the innocence that once clung to her has withered, replaced by a cold, calculating demeanor. The first rumors of her cruelty begin to surface, hushed whispers among the servants, terrified of even breathing too loudly in her presence. One winter's night, A servant girl trembles as she stands before the Countess. Her hands, raw and cracked from the cold, fumble with the hem of her dress. She had failed to polish a piece of silver to Elizabeth's satisfaction, a mistake she would soon regret. Elizabeth's eyes narrow, her gaze icy. "You dare present this to me?" Her voice is sharp, slicing through the silence. The girl stammers an apology, but it only seems to fuel the Countess's fury. Without warning, Elizabeth's hand lashes out, striking the girl across the face. The force of the blow sends her reeling, but there is no mercy in the Countess's eyes. The girl stumbles backward, her hand instinctively covering her cheek, blood emerging through her fingers. Elizabeth's gaze follows the trail of blood, a flicker of something dark and primal igniting in her eyes. A single drop, ruby red and glistening, clings to her own hand, a stark contrast against her pale skin. A sudden silence descends upon the room, broken only by the girl's whimpers. Elizabeth, transfixed by the sight of the blood, raises her hand slowly, her eyes never leaving the crimson droplet. With a deliberate motion, she raises her hand to her mouth, softly and slowly caresses the droplet with her lips. The metallic tang of blood fills her mouth, and a shiver runs down her spine. It's a sensation that awakens a familiar thrill within her, a potent cocktail of power and forbidden pleasure. A slow smile spreads across her lips, a cruel twist that sends a chill through the room. Elizabeth's eyes, once filled with icy disdain, now smolder with a predatory gleam. A darkness, like a spreading stain, eclipses their former clarity, hinting at the monstrous depths stirring within her soul. Elizabeth observed the girl crumpled to the ground, a sense of power and thrill coursing through her veins. The girl's sobs were music to her ears, a symphony of suffering that echoed through the stone corridors of the castle as Elizabeth coldly decided this girl would become her latest plaything. On this occasion, it took only a matter of days before the servant girl's feeble whimpers were silenced forever, her fragile life extinguished under the relentless cruelty of Elizabeth's hand. Each agonizing cry, each desperate plea for mercy, was met with cold indifference until, at last, the girl's suffering ceased. Elizabeth's latest victim leaving behind only the haunting echo of her final breath in the darkened halls of Čachtice Castle. This was only the beginning. This was only the beginning. The incidents of cruelty grew more frequent, each act more brutal than the last. Elizabeth began to experiment with pain, driven by an insatiable curiosity to explore the limits of human endurance. Servant girls, once merely invisible hands to serve her, became regular playthings, pawns in her sadistic games. In the privacy of her chambers, Elizabeth devised new methods of punishment. A servant who spilled a drop of wine found herself stripped and lashed, the whip cutting deep into her flesh. Another, who dared to meet the Countess's gaze, was forced to stand in the snow until her feet turned blue with frostbite. Elizabeth watched, her eyes gleaming with perverse satisfaction as the girl's limbs slowly succumbed to the cold. Elizabeth's cruelty wasn't a solitary endeavor. She had accomplices, individuals who were either coerced or willingly participated in her heinous acts. Among them was Ilona Yo, known more intimately as Helena. Helena wasn't just a servant, she was Elizabeth's confidant, a woman bound to her mistress by secrets and shared darkness. It was whispered that Helena, with her knowledge of herbs and potions, aided Elizabeth in her torturous practices. Some even believed she was the one who procured the young girls, luring them to the castle with promises of work or shelter. Then there was Dorothea Shentes, or Dorco as she was called. Dorco was a simple servant, a girl from the village who found herself trapped in the castle's sinister world. Whether out of fear or a twisted sense of loyalty, Dorco became Elizabeth's willing accomplice. She was often seen assisting in the torture chambers, her once innocent hands now stained with the blood of the innocent. And finally there was Fichko, the dwarf servant. Fichko's small stature and unusual appearance made him an object of ridicule and fascination. Elizabeth, however, saw in him a useful tool. Fichko's strength belied his size, and his agility allowed him to move unnoticed through the castle's hidden passages. He became Elizabeth's spy, her eyes and ears in the shadows. The gruesome task of disposing of Elizabeth's victims fell upon the shoulders of her loyal servants, Helena, Dorco, and Fichko. Under the cover of darkness, they would silently remove the broken bodies from the castle, their shovels carving shallow graves into the unforgiving earth. The moon, a silent witness to their grim labors, cast an eerie glow upon the scene, illuminating the twisted complicity that bound these individuals together. The stench of death clung to them, a constant reminder of the horrors they enabled. Yet fear and a twisted sense of loyalty kept their lips sealed, their secrets buried alongside the countless victims of their mistress's insatiable cruelty. These were the faces of Elizabeth's darkness, the individuals who enabled her cruelty. They were the whispers in the night, the unseen hands that inflicted pain. Their stories, intertwined with Elizabeth's, painted a chilling picture of complicity and the depths of human depravity. In the spring of 1590, Elizabeth's cruelty escalated further. A young maid, weak from days of relentless labor, collapsed in the kitchen. Elizabeth ordered her to be brought to the great hall, where she waited with a hot iron in her hand. The maid was dragged before her by her accomplices, Helena and Dorco, her skin pale and clammy. Elizabeth did not hesitate. She pressed the iron against the girl's flesh, the sizzle and stench of burning skin filling the room. The girl's screams reverberated off the walls, a haunting testament to Elizabeth's growing depravity. But the horrors did not end there. Elizabeth's twisted mind began to blur the line between discipline and pleasure. She reveled in the fear that her very presence instilled, the way the servants flinched at her approach, their terror a mirror of the darkness festering within her. The servants began to disappear, one by one. They were taken to the castle's dungeons, where Elizabeth conducted her vile experiments. The fortunate ones perished quickly, their bodies discarded in shallow graves outside the castle walls. Others were less lucky, enduring days, even weeks, of unimaginable torment before their broken bodies finally gave out. Elizabeth's sadism knew no bounds. She delighted in inventing new tortures, each more gruesome than the last. One particularly cold winter, she ordered a servant to be stripped naked and doused in water before being left outside to freeze. The sight of the girl's frozen corpse, her eyes wide with terror, brought Elizabeth a sick sense of satisfaction. Yet, amidst the horror, there were whispers of something darker still, a ritualistic element to Elizabeth's cruelty. Some said that she believed the blood of virgins held the key to eternal youth, that her sadistic acts were not merely for pleasure, but for a twisted form of self-preservation. Whether these rumors held any truth, or were merely the fearful imaginings of those who served her, they only added to the growing legend of the Blood Countess. As the years passed, Elizabeth's reputation spread beyond the castle walls like a creeping fog. The villagers spoke of her in hushed tones, their voices trembling with fear. Children were warned to stay away from the castle, for it was said that those who entered its gates were never seen again. Young girls, in particular, seemed to vanish without a trace, their absences leaving behind a chilling silence in the villages surrounding Čachtice. A sense of dread settled over the land, as parents clutched their daughters closer, their hearts heavy with the unspoken fear that their child might be the next to disappear. The seeds of sadism, sown in the early years of her marriage, had taken root and flourished into a monstrous hunger for power and control. Yet, amidst this growing darkness, Elizabeth also experienced the transformative journey of motherhood. Several children were born to Elizabeth and Ferenc within the walls of Čachtice Castle, their innocent cries a new sound in those halls, distinct from the tortured screams that commonly echoed within them. One can only speculate on the complexities of Elizabeth's maternal heart. Did she hold her infants with tenderness, momentarily forgetting the cruel desires that consumed her? Or did motherhood merely serve as a reminder of her own mortality, fueling her desperate attempts to cling to youth and beauty? Perhaps the vulnerability of her children only served to highlight her own power, a stark contrast to the fragility of life she so readily extinguished. Regardless, the presence of children within the castle walls did little to temper Elizabeth's sadistic tendencies. In fact, it's chilling to consider that her own offspring may have witnessed glimpses of their mother's monstrous nature. The young countess, once known for her beauty and refinement, had become something else entirely, a predator lurking in the shadows of Čachtice Castle, waiting to strike. And as her children grew, they would become tragically entangled in the web of their mother's darkness, their lives forever scarred by the horrors that unfolded within their own home. While Elizabeth was grappling with the complexities of motherhood within the confines of Čachtice, Ferenc was immersed in a world far removed from the castle's shadows. As a respected military leader, he spent countless days on horseback, leading his troops into battle against the ever-present Ottoman threat. The Ottoman Empire, a vast and powerful force, had been steadily expanding its reach across Europe for centuries, casting a long shadow over Christendom. Their armies, renowned for their discipline and ferocity, threatened to engulf Hungary, leaving Ferenc and his fellow nobles with no choice but to take up arms in defense of their homeland. The clash of steel and the cries of the wounded filled his ears, a notable contrast to the quiet nursery at Čachtice. When not on the battlefield, Ferenc found himself navigating the treacherous waters of court politics. The royal court, a cauldron of ambition and intrigue, demanded his attention. Alliances were forged and broken, favors traded, and whispered plots hatched in dimly lit corners. Ferenc, ever the shrewd strategist, played his part, ensuring the Nadezhdi name remained prominent and influential. Yet, even amidst the chaos of war and politics, Ferenc never entirely forgot his responsibilities as a landowner. Letters and reports from his stewards kept him informed of the harvest yields, the livestock's health, and the endless disputes that arose among his tenants. Though physically distant, he remained connected to his vast estates, his mind constantly juggling the concerns of both the battlefield and the harvest field. But as Ferenc's star rose in the world of men, Elizabeth's darkness deepened within the castle walls. Isolated and increasingly unhinged, Elizabeth descended further into the abyss of her own depravity. Meanwhile, Ferenc, consumed by duty and ambition, turned a blind eye to the horrors unfolding in his own home. Perhaps knowingly, he fueled his wife's monstrous appetite by approving more and more servants to be sent to Čachtice, their young lives offered up as sacrifices to the darkness that festered within its walls. With each act of cruelty, her thirst for blood grew stronger, her methods more depraved. The darkness within her spread, consuming her soul, and soon it would consume everything around her. As servants regularly vanished and the castle walls echoed with the screams of the tormented, Elizabeth's appetite for cruelty became insatiable. Her husband's death, an event that should have brought mourning, instead became the catalyst for a new chapter of horror. Without Ferenc Nadezhdy's presence in her life, Elizabeth's power grew, and she was free to indulge her darkest desires without restraint. The Blood Countess's reign of terror was about to reach its horrifying climax. Chapter 3: The Chamber of Horrors. The year is 1604. Elizabeth Báthory is now a widow, her husband Ferenc Nadezhdy dead from an illness that took him slowly, agonizingly. A mysterious ailment, perhaps gout or some insidious infection, first struck in 1601, gnawing at his legs with unrelenting pain. The Black Knight of Hungary, once a fierce warrior, found himself increasingly crippled, his once proud strides reduced to hobbled steps, then to a wheelchair's confining embrace. By 1603, the disease had ravaged his body, leaving him permanently disabled, a shadow of his former self. Bedridden and racked with pain, Ferenc's spirit dwindled along with his physical strength. The man who had once commanded armies and revelled in the thrill of battle was now trapped within the walls of his own failing body. His once booming voice grew weak, his laughter faded, replaced by groans of discomfort and the weary sighs of a man who knew his time was nearing its end. The castle, once filled with the clamour of soldiers and the bustle of servants, now sat eerily quiet, like a slumbering beast. But beneath this quiet exterior, something far more sinister was stirring. Despite the looming darkness, Elizabeth maintained the outward appearance of an accomplished noblewoman. She managed a sophisticated estate with precision, overseeing not only the daily operations, but also ensuring her children received the best education possible. Professional women were employed to teach her daughters, imparting skills in languages, etiquette, and other subjects suited for aristocratic life. These teachers, much like Elizabeth herself, reflected the elevated position that noble families held within Hungarian society. With her husband gone, any remaining shreds of restraint that Elizabeth may have felt dissolved. The thin veneer of respectability she once maintained had shattered, revealing the full extent of her malevolence. The death of Nadezhdy had unshackled her darkest impulses, allowing them to flourish unchecked. Her descent into madness began in earnest, and the horrors that followed were enough to chill the blood of even the most hardened soul. Deep within the castle, hidden from the light of day, lie the dungeons, a labyrinth of terror where Elizabeth indulges in her most depraved desires. The corridors are lined with iron doors, behind which the tortured wails of her victims echo, a haunting chorus that never ceases. Here, in the bowels of Čachtice, Elizabeth's sadism reaches its zenith. It was rumored that within these dungeons stood an Iron Maiden, a horrific device designed to impale its victims with cruel spikes. Elizabeth circled the device, her eyes alight with a feverish glow. A teenage girl is dragged into the room, her body trembling with fear. Her eyes, wide with terror, dart around the chamber, desperately searching for an escape that does not exist. Elizabeth approaches her slowly, savoring the terror in the girl's eyes. "Do you know why you're here?" she asks, her voice a chilling whisper. The girl shakes her head frantically, tears streaming down her face, but Elizabeth offers no comfort, only a cruel smile. "You will soon understand." With a single motion, Elizabeth's servants force the girl into the Iron Maiden, her slender body dwarfed by the towering instrument of death. The door creaks as it closes, the spikes pressing ever so slightly against her skin. The girl's breath quickens, her heart pounding in her chest as the door is sealed shut. The last sound she hears is the clang of the latch before the spikes drive inward, piercing her flesh from all sides. The chamber fills with a wet, choking gurgle as blood seeps from the device's base, pooling on the cold stone floor. But the Iron Maiden is only one of the many horrors Elizabeth has devised. In another chamber, a girl is tied to a wooden chair, her wrists bound with rough rope, her bare feet dangle just above the floor, toes brushing against the icy stone. Elizabeth stands before her, holding a pair of red-hot pincers. Without a word, she reaches down and grasps the girl's foot, clamping the pincers around her toes. The girl's scream is immediate and piercing as Elizabeth slowly tears the nails from her toes, one by one. Blood drips from the pincers, hissing as it hits the hot metal, and the girl's agony echoes through the chamber. In yet another room, a young maid is shackled to the wall, her arms stretched above her head. The cold metal bites into her wrists as Elizabeth approaches with a branding iron, its tip glowing a malevolent orange. The girl whimpers, her breath coming in ragged gasps, but Elizabeth's face is devoid of mercy. She presses the iron against the girl's chest, the sizzle of burning flesh mingling with her shrieks of pain. The stench of charred skin fills the air, and Elizabeth watches with a detached interest as the girl's body convulses in agony. But perhaps the most infamous of Elizabeth's tortures is the blood bath. Driven by a twisted belief in the rejuvenating powers of virgin blood, Elizabeth has devised a method of collecting it in the most brutal fashion. In a specially designed room, girls are suspended upside down from the ceiling, their bodies hanging like grotesque ornaments. Below them, large basins are placed to catch the blood as it drains from their slit throats. Elizabeth stands beneath them, her face bathed in the warm spray, her eyes closed in ecstasy. It is said that she bathes in this blood, believing it to be the secret to her youthful appearance. Whether this is true or simply a dark embellishment, the reality is no less horrifying. The blood of innocence stains the very stones of Čachtice Castle. While the truth of these stories remains shrouded in uncertainty, likely exaggerated over time, the undeniable reality is that Elizabeth Báthory's cruelty knew no bounds. As the weeks turn into months, the atrocities continue unabated. The dungeon floors are slick with blood, the walls adorned with the remnants of Elizabeth's vile experiments. Servants who survive the horrors speak of chains embedded in the walls, of instruments designed to stretch, crush, and tear. The sheer variety of tortures is a testament to Elizabeth's sadistic ingenuity, a mind consumed by the darkest of desires. Mothers from the surrounding villages pleaded for answers as to why their daughters never returned, but they were met with silence, or worse, threats. Fear gripped the countryside as the tale of the Blood Countess's cruelty spread like wildfire. The once revered name of Báthory became synonymous with death. Elizabeth, as head of all the Nadajdi estates after her husband's death, wielded immense power and influence. This position, coupled with her noble lineage, allowed her to operate with a chilling sense of impunity. She saw herself as beyond the reach of the law, a law unto herself. The cries of grieving mothers and fathers fell on deaf ears. The legal system, often deferential to the nobility, seemed powerless to intervene. Elizabeth's actions, however monstrous, were shielded by her status and wealth, creating a terrifying reality where justice seemed unattainable for the common folk. Put simply, if you were poor, there was no protection from the Countess's cruelty. Elizabeth's reign of terror exemplified the dark side of feudalism, where the powerful could exploit the vulnerable without fear of reprisal. It was a stark reminder of the vast gulf between the privileged and the powerless, a gulf that Elizabeth exploited to the fullest. Elizabeth's cruelty extended beyond the walls of her castle. She ventured into the nearby villages, selecting her victims with a discerning eye, as though they were cattle at a market, chosen for slaughter. Each girl was carefully assessed, their youth, beauty, and health scrutinized, ensuring they would provide the maximum satisfaction in her sadistic rituals. A girl with soft skin, another with hair like spun gold. Each was chosen for the pleasure of watching them suffer. She took them back to Čachtice Castle, where they were subjected to her vile experiments. The tortures became more elaborate, more depraved. Elizabeth began to experiment with new methods, driven by a desire to push the boundaries of human endurance. She ordered the girls to be submerged in ice-cold water, their bodies trembling violently as the life drained from them. She watched with a clinical interest as they succumbed to the cold, their skin turning blue, their lips cracked and bleeding. Elizabeth had turned Čachtice Castle into a house of horrors, its walls stained with the blood of the innocent. The servants who enabled Elizabeth's sadistic tortures enjoyed their positions of power that they had carved out for themselves. The other servants who survived walked the castle's halls like spectres, their eyes hollow, their spirits crushed. The few who dared to flee were hunted down, their bodies returned to the castle as a warning to others. For years, Elizabeth's interactions with her powerful family and Hungarian nobility helped shield her from suspicion. Her political connections, along with the deference afforded to noble blood, created a protective barrier that allowed her to indulge her sadistic tendencies with little fear of reprisal. Only after the growing body count and escalating atrocities became too numerous to ignore did the protective curtain around her begin to fall. Elizabeth's reign of terror continued for years, unchecked and unchallenged. The local nobility, fearful of her power and influence, turned a blind eye to the atrocities. But as the body count rose and the rumors grew more gruesome, it became impossible to ignore the monster in their midst. By 1609, the rumors had reached the highest echelons of power. King Matthias II of Hungary, already indebted to the Báthory family, could no longer ignore the outcry. He ordered an investigation into the mysterious deaths surrounding the Countess. King Matthias, burdened by the weight of countless whispers that painted a chilling portrait of Elizabeth Báthory, knew he could delay no longer. He needed someone discreet, capable, and incorruptible. His choice fell upon Thurzó György, the Palatine of Hungary. Thurzó, a man of astute intellect and unwavering resolve, held a position of immense power and prestige. As the Palatine, he was second only to the king himself, responsible for upholding justice and maintaining order throughout the realm. Renowned for his fairness and meticulous attention to detail, Thurzó was the ideal candidate to navigate the treacherous waters of this investigation. With a somber expression, the king summoned Thurzó to his chambers. "Palatine," he began, his voice heavy with concern. "The rumors surrounding Countess Báthory have grown too persistent to ignore. I charge you with investigating these allegations thoroughly and bringing the truth to light, no matter how unsettling it may be." Thurzó, understanding the gravity of the task before him, bowed his head in acceptance. "Your Majesty," he replied, his tone resolute, "I shall leave no stone unturned in pursuit of justice." The king nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "I trust your judgment, Palatine. May God guide you in this endeavor." With the king's blessing, Thurzó set forth on his mission. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, and that the truth he sought might be more horrifying than any rumor. But he was determined to see this investigation through to its end, to ensure that justice was served, no matter the cost. It was the beginning of the end for Elizabeth Báthory. As the investigators began to close in, Elizabeth's madness only deepened. The dungeons of Čachtice Castle contained horrors where unspeakable acts were committed. The Blood Countess, now fully consumed by her lust for power and cruelty, prepared to defend her twisted legacy at any cost. The final chapter of her reign of terror was about to unfold, and the world would soon bear witness to the true extent of her depravity. Chapter 4. The Shadows Close In. Under the cloak of a winter's dusk, Thurzo Georgi and his retinue arrived at the imposing gates of Castle Čachtice. The fortress seemed to exude an eerie silence, an atmosphere filled with the chilling tales that swirled around its mistress. Thurzo, ever the meticulous investigator, wasted no time. He ordered his men to secure the castle, ensuring that no one could enter or leave without his knowledge. Then, accompanied by a handful of trusted officials, he ventured into the heart of the beast. The castle's interior was a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors and cavernous chambers, each step echoing with an unsettling hollowness. The air hung heavy with a musty scent, a chilling prelude to the horrors that awaited. Thurzo's investigation was methodical and thorough. He interviewed the castle's servants, their faces etched with fear and trepidation. He scoured the castle's records, searching for any clues that might shed light on the Countess's dark deeds. And he explored every nook and cranny of the fortress, his keen eyes missing nothing. Yet, amidst the quivering lips and averted gazes of Elizabeth's servants, he sensed a wall of silence, a carefully constructed barrier erected by the Countess's most loyal confidants. Ilona, the Countess's formidable head chambermaid, and the dwarf Fichko, her ever-present shadow, moved through the castle like wraiths, their eyes darting suspiciously, their every action laced with a silent threat. They attempted to misdirect Thurzo, leading him down empty corridors and into vacant rooms, their lies and evasions a desperate attempt to shield their mistress from the encroaching darkness. But Thurzo was not easily deterred. He saw through their charade, his intuition sharpened by years of unraveling deceptions. He pressed on, his resolve unwavering, his determination fueled by a growing chorus of soft whispers and confessions. As Thurzo and his men ventured deeper into the castle's labyrinthine depths, they stumbled upon a hidden chamber. The air within was thick with the metallic tang of blood, and the floor was slick with a dark, viscous substance. A wave of nausea swept through the investigators as they realized the true extent of the Countess's depravity. At that moment, Elizabeth Báthory herself appeared, her once regal bearing now twisted into a mask of fury. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" she demanded, her voice raspy with rage. "By what right do you defile my home?" Thurzo met her gaze unflinchingly. "Countess Báthory," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, "I am here on the orders of King Matthias himself. I have evidence that suggests you have committed heinous crimes against countless innocent lives. You are under arrest." Elizabeth's face contorted in disbelief. "Arrest? Me? You dare accuse a Báthory of such transgressions? I am above the law." Thurzo's expression remained impassive. "The law applies to all, Countess, even those of noble blood. Your reign of terror ends today." With a curt nod, he signaled to his men. They moved swiftly, seizing Elizabeth and escorting her back to her chambers. The Countess struggled, her screams echoing through the castle walls, but her protests were in vain. The iron door clanged shut, sealing her fate. Confined to her gilded cage, Elizabeth raged against her captors. Her world, once a playground for her sadistic desires, was crumbling around her. The hunter had become the hunted, and the shadows that had long cloaked her crimes were now closing in, threatening to consume her entirely. It wasn't long before Thurzo's search yielded its first grim discoveries. Hidden chambers, stained with blood and littered with instruments of torture, bore silent witness to unspeakable acts of cruelty. The cries of the Countess's victims seemed to linger in the air, a haunting chorus of pain and despair. As the evidence mounted, a sense of dread settled over the castle. The servants, once tight-lipped, began to crack under the pressure, their whispered confessions painting a horrifying picture of the Countess's sadistic pleasures. One servant, trembling uncontrollably, revealed a chilling secret. The Countess had a penchant for burying her victims in the dead of night, their bodies hidden beneath the frozen earth of the castle grounds. Armed with this gruesome knowledge, Thurzo ordered his men to excavate the areas surrounding the castle. The winter air crackled with anticipation as shovels bit into the frozen ground, each strike echoing like a death knell. And then, the first body was unearthed. A young girl, her once vibrant features contorted in a mask of terror, her flesh bearing the marks of unimaginable torture. The sight sent a wave of revulsion through the investigators, their stomachs churning with a mixture of horror and disgust. The sheer scale of the carnage was overwhelming, a macabre tapestry woven with the threads of countless lives, cut short. More bodies followed, each one a testament to the Countess's depravity. Young, old, rich, poor, all had fallen victim to her insatiable bloodlust. The sheer scale of the carnage was overwhelming, a macabre tapestry woven with the threads of countless lives cut short. The discovery of the mass graves sent shockwaves through the kingdom. The rumors, once dismissed as mere gossip, now stood as undeniable truth. Elizabeth Báthory, the Countess of Blood, had been unmasked, her reign of terror exposed for all to see. Elizabeth, however, remained defiant. Confined to her chambers, she seethed with indignation. How dare these peasants, these insignificant worms, question her authority? She was a Báthory, a descendant of kings. The law did not apply to her. But Thurzo was relentless. He had seen enough to know that the Countess was a monster, and he would not rest until she was brought to justice. The shadows were closing in on Elizabeth Báthory, and her reign of terror was about to come to an end. In one final act of defiance, Elizabeth attempts to flee, but she is swiftly captured. Her hands, once instruments of unspeakable cruelty, are bound in chains, and she is dragged before Thurzo. The Palatine's face is grim as he surveys the horrors around him, his eyes hard with determination. "Elizabeth Báthory," he declares, "you will answer for your crimes." The Blood Countess, once feared by all who knew her name, is now reduced to a prisoner, her reign of terror brought to an abrupt and ignominious end. But the full extent of her cruelty, the sheer number of lives she has destroyed, will haunt the annals of history forever. As Elizabeth Báthory's reign of terror crumbles, the world braces for the inevitable reckoning. The wheels of justice, set in motion by Thurzo's relentless pursuit of truth, are turning inexorably towards a trial that will shake the very foundations of Hungarian society. The Blood Countess, stripped of her power and confined within the walls of her own castle, awaits her fate. Her story, a chilling testament to the depths of human cruelty, is far from over. The final chapter, one that will echo through history, is about to be written. Chapter 5: The Reckoning. It is January 1611. The Grand Hall of Čachtice Castle, normally a place of feasting and celebration, is now transformed into a somber courtroom. The air crackles with attention as nobles and commoners alike gather to witness the trial of the century. But the accused herself, Elizabeth Báthory, the infamous Blood Countess, is conspicuously absent. Her noble status has shielded her from direct prosecution, but her accomplices are not so fortunate. Dorothea Shentes, Ilona Yo, Katarina Benitska, and Fichko, once Elizabeth's trusted servants, now stand accused of participating in her heinous crimes. Their faces, etched with fear and remorse, tell a tale of complicity and terror. Under the stern gaze of György Thurzó, the Palatine of Hungary, the witnesses recount the horrors they witnessed and participated in. Dorothea, her voice trembling, describes how she assisted Elizabeth in torturing young girls, their screams echoing through the castle walls. Ilona, tears streaming down her face, confesses to luring unsuspecting victims into the Countess's clutches. The courtroom is filled with gasps and murmurs of disbelief as the gruesome details unfold. The image of Elizabeth Báthory, once a respected noblewoman, is shattered, replaced by the horrifying reality of her sadistic nature. Hundreds of witnesses, including servants and peasants, came forward to testify against Elizabeth and her accomplices. Their testimonies painted a damning picture of the Countess's cruelty, recounting acts of torture, murder, and unimaginable suffering. These witness accounts played a crucial role in solidifying the charges against her, detailing not only Elizabeth's direct involvement, but also the complicity of her servants. Some accounts claim that a chilling document was presented as evidence, a list, allegedly written in Elizabeth's own hand, containing the names of her victims. The sheer number of lives lost is staggering, up to 650 victims, one of her servants claimed, a testament to the scale of her depravity. Thurzó, his voice filled with righteous anger, delivers a scathing condemnation of the accused. "You have aided and abetted a monster," he declares, his words echoing through the hall. "Your hands are stained with the blood of innocents." The verdict is swift and merciless. Dorothea Shentes, Ilona Yo, and Katarina Benitska are sentenced to death. Their fingers, the instruments of their cruelty, are torn off with red-hot pincers before they are burned alive at the stake. Fichko, deemed less culpable, is beheaded. While her accomplices faced public execution, Elizabeth herself was spared. Her high social status and powerful connections undoubtedly played a crucial role in this outcome. Instead of facing a public trial and execution, which could have brought scandal and unwanted attention to the Hungarian nobility, she was confined to a solitary chamber within Čachtice Castle, where she would remain until her death. It is likely that powerful nobles intervened to protect their own interests and potentially seize her vast wealth and estates. The once proud Countess is now a prisoner in her own home, her world reduced to a dimly lit room with a single barred window. Food and water are passed through a narrow slit in the door, her only connection to the outside world. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Elizabeth, once surrounded by servants and sycophants, is now utterly alone. The silence of her confinement is broken only by the whispers of her victims, their spectral voices haunting her every waking moment. On the night of August 21, 1614, at the age of 54, Elizabeth Báthory is found dead in her housebound prison cell. Her once beautiful body is withered and frail, her eyes vacant and lifeless. Though she had been spared a direct trial, the punishment of living in isolation until her death was her final sentence. The Blood Countess, who revelled in the suffering of others, has finally succumbed to her own lonely demise. Čachtice Castle, the silent witness to her atrocities, was left to the ravages of time. It fell into disrepair, its once proud walls crumbling under the weight of neglect and decay. For centuries it stood as a desolate monument to the horrors that transpired within, a chilling reminder of the Blood Countess's reign of terror. Elizabeth's children, however, survived the scandal and went on to live relatively stable lives. Her daughters, Anna and Catalin, married into noble families, securing advantageous alliances. Her son, Paul, inherited the remaining family estates and worked to restore the family's reputation. Despite their mother's infamy, the Báthory lineage endured, albeit overshadowed by Elizabeth's dark legacy. In recent times, efforts have been made to preserve the ruins and transform the castle into a historical site. While the scars of its dark past remain, it now serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of justice and the enduring power of truth. Elizabeth Báthory's story, a chilling testament to the depths of human cruelty, serves as a cautionary tale for generations to come. Her name, forever synonymous with sadism and bloodshed, remains etched in the annals of history, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human heart. Thank you for watching this episode of Fireside Villainies, Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess. If you liked this episode of Fireside Villainies, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with new episodes. You can also help me bring more episodes to life by becoming a member of Fireside Villainies. Members get access to exclusive content, early releases, and more. There's more information in the video description. And so the tale of Elizabeth Báthory comes to an end. Her life, marked by unimaginable cruelty, serves as a stark reminder of the darkness that can reside within the human heart. From a powerful noblewoman to a figure of terror, Báthory's story illustrates the dangers of unchecked power and the ease with which morality can be cast aside. The horrors she inflicted on countless innocent girls cannot be overstated. Each victim endured horrific suffering, their lives cut tragically short by the monstrous acts of a woman who wielded power without conscience. As we recount her story, we must not forget the lives lost, the families shattered, and the fear that gripped those who lived in her shadow. Yet, even in the shadow of her legacy, there is a vital lesson. The downfall of the Blood Countess, driven by those who refused to ignore her crimes, shows us the enduring fight for justice and the resilience of the human spirit. Elizabeth Báthory's story reminds us of the importance of vigilance against the abuse of power and the moral responsibility we all share to resist the darkness, both within ourselves and the world around us. Thank you for joining me through this sinister chapter in history. I hope this exploration of Elizabeth Báthory's life has been immersive and thought-provoking. If you're interested in exploring the lighter side of history, the lives of inspiring and remarkable people who have shaped our world, you might like to check out our sister channel, Fireside Legacies. There's a link in the video description. It's worth remembering that history is not just a collection of dates and facts. It's an intertwining thread of human experience, both noble and ignoble. And it's through understanding the past, even its darkest chapters, that we can learn to build a better future. Stay tuned to Fireside Villainies for more sinister stories from history. Until next time, tread carefully in history's shadows.